Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us. Brad is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. We broadcast this classroom 2 hours, Monday through Friday, from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. If you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. And if you'd like to listen on the telephone listen line, which is up 24/7, 605-477-3249. ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, CNN all have correspondents in Australia. So do we. But she just doesn't read the news. She is the news. Author, farmer, and off-grid entrepreneur, Guineith Isaacs. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
I am well. So would you say all of that's true? Because I believe it's true.
Well, I do, I have been in the press from time to time. Yeah.
Yep.
Over the years, yeah.
Well, okay. Well, as far as a correspondent, you are a USA correspondent. You are in Australia. You are an author. You are a farmer. You are an off-grid entrepreneur.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And,
so you can update that Vitae, that experience profile, and just add correspondent.
Yeah, well, I say I'm a radio broadcaster.
There you
That's what I say on my Facebook page and all of that,
You are on the largest alternative radio network in the world.
That's right. Yeah.
And number two, you're on the two largest. No. Genesis Communications Network and Republic Broadcasting Network.
Yeah, and I don't know if the class is aware of this or not, but I know that you can verify this. Occasionally, sometimes we actually outrank Alex Jones, which I think is remarkable. I love Alex Jones. I think he's great. A
lot of people. He's punched his way through, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean he has enabled more people to listen because he's on more radio stations than most of the other alternative radio broadcasters. So he's gotten the word out, and he's gotten people to wake up, and he's gotten people to say, really, could that really be true? And in that line of thinking, I'd like to mention John Stadtmiller. John Stadtmiller is the owner of Republic Broadcasting. And I used to listen to him on shortwave radio when I lived in Virginia, way before I was a broadcaster. I didn't even think about being a broadcaster back then. And I would hear John Stadtmiller say things, and I just couldn't believe him. Like, is that really true? Is that really true? And then I'd research it more and more and more, and yeah, it was true. And why am I saying that? Well, I was talking to one of our instructors, Deborah Brewster, on the air. She's an entrepreneur. I'm sorry, not on the air, privately. And she said she heard me on the radio talking about 9/11 as an inside job. And she thought, what? Is that possible? No way, no way. So I'm paraphrasing, but she said that she couldn't believe it. She couldn't believe that 9/11 would be an inside job. Then she started researching. Then she found out that the things that we say are true. So now she's out preaching. So people like Deborah Brewster, Alex Jones, John Stadtmiller, and the rest of the faculty here at USA Prepares, plus a lot of other broadcasters and the alternative media, are getting the word out, and people are starting to question a lot of things, like the public training camp. Like, do I really... people believed that they had to send their children to school. And until they actually go to sit in on classes and find out what the children are learning, then they say, have I lost my mind? So class, that is something that I think you should consider doing. Show up at school with your child. Let's say you have an elementary school child or a high school child. Show up and then go into the principal's office and say, I'd like to sit in on my son's classes today. No notification, okay? Don't warn them. Just say, I'd like to sit in today. Now, can you do that? Absolutely. Absolutely. And who did that in my family? My father. My father, as a school principal, wanted to see what Vinny was learning. He just showed up, took me to school, showed up, went into the principal's office, said, hi, I'm Vin Finelli. I'd like to sit in on my son's classes. What are they going to say? No, you can't do it. They let him, and he learned what was happening in the school that I was attending. And what did I do? Same thing. I showed up at school with our children, and I saw what they were learning. And I got to tell you, it didn't take long to take him out of school. It didn't take him long. It didn't take long. Because what you'll find out is that teachers are in the business of eliciting the responses that they say, okay, children, what kind of government do we have? Democracy. Democracy. Can you all say democracy? Democracy. Children, what kind of government do we have? Democracy. So now they think they have a democracy, and they go home and say, yeah, well, Dad, we have a democracy. Mom, we have a democracy. Pretty soon, if you see that and you go, wait a minute, that's not right. We have a representative republic.
Yep.
That's what we have.
And here in Australia, we have a constitutional monarchy.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we have. And by the way, it's not the Queen of Australia. It's Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
That's who it is. It's not the Queen of Canada. Okay, I don't know if they get pulled that one, but if anybody says the Queen of Canada doesn't exist. The Queen of Australia doesn't exist. Okay, it's Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So
do you know where the title?
Same thing, though.
Do you know where that title came from? Her Majesty. I mean, we don't call Donald Trump His Majesty. Where'd that come from?
I think that it's sort of supposed to be a fractal thing of actually. Under British common law, she's second in command to Jesus Christ, literally. So you call God His Majesty, okay? So because she's second in command to Jesus Christ, she's also called Your Majesty.
Okay,
and
how about
apparently that's where it comes from.
How about number 3? Who's third in line of succession?
Well, actually, we all stand equal before God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's a funny thing. Under the common law, the Queen actually has no more rights than you, and she has no more rights than me. You know, but she is the titular head on earth of the Church of England. So that's what I mean. You know, the one who is higher in rank and authority in the Church of England, the only one who's higher in rank and authority in the Church of England than her is Jesus himself. So there we go. That's just a bit of common law education. But in truth, under the common law, she has no more rights than you, and she has no more rights than me, which is very easy to demonstrate. Because when she wants to go to the City of London, she has to stand at the bar and knock. They have a gate on the City of London, which is the walled area within London. It's about a square mile. In fact, it's called the Square Mile, and it's the original fortress that was London town, going back to Roman times. And these days it's been taken over by the bankers and the lawyers, okay? And they have put a gate up on the gate, and they have a bar, which is the origin of the word the bar, incidentally, in case anyone's wondering, as in legal profession. And if the Queen wants to go in there, she has to knock. And she has to stand there, and she has to wait for the guards to come and make sure it's okay, and, you know, make sure that she's got a de jure reason for being there. And then they decide if they're going to let her in or not. And actually, truth be told, it's exactly the same as she came to your property, or if she came to my property, she'd have to stand at the gate and she would have to wait until we let her in.
What is the protocol for meeting the Queen? Like, let's say you or I were going to meet the Queen. What would be the protocol?
Well, I guess you would probably have to write and make an appointment.
Well, no, let's say...
if you wanted to meet with me, you'd have to write and make an appointment, or contact me and make an appointment. Mm-hmm. So it would be much the same, I guess.
Okay. Do people, well, do ladies curtsy?
Yes.
Okay. Is it required?
Yes, they do.
Is it required?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that.
All right.
Yeah.
And do men bow?
Yes, they do. But I don't know if that's required either. You know, so there's things of etiquette and there's things of form, and there's, you know, things that are required, but I don't know which is which, to be perfectly honest. But it's like this. The ways that were set up from hundreds of years ago, and they were set up in a particular way for a particular reason. And Martina Markota has recently done an excellent piece on etiquette and the reasons why we have etiquette.
Guineith Isaacs is with us, live in Australia. Guineith, I was thinking about the word etiquette, and I've been talking about it for several days. Etiquette is being polite, its traditions, its form, and we seem to have forgotten that there is such a word as etiquette, evidenced by how cursing and swearing is now dominating conversations by actors and politicians and people of notoriety and fame. It's unbelievable to me how much cursing has pushed out other descriptive words that, you know, are polite. We've become pretty angry and pretty careless in the way we treat others. Are you seeing that in Australia as well?
Listen, Australia is a convict settlement. we win the cussing Olympics as far as any English-speaking country goes, and it's always been the case. And I have to make a guilty disclaimer here. I would say, you know, as a reincarnated pirate who has Tourette's syndrome, who lives in Australia, I do drop the occasional F-bomb. My language is not squeaky clean off air. I'm very sorry, Vincent. But it's just true, and I have tried to stop swearing, and I can't. It's a losing battle.
Well,
And
you do pretty,
like I say,
for 2 hours a week, you do pretty well.
But for 2 hours a week, I do pretty well. I know that things have a time and a place, you know, and so for my broadcast time, I'm a good girl. But unfortunately, in the rest of my life, sometimes it just slips out.
Well,
and like I say, but like I know that you have broadcast etiquette, and so I make an effort to moderate what I say, moderate my language when I'm on air, and that it ultimately does come down to etiquette.
Well, there's broadcast. There's broadcast etiquette.
Anarchy doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. There's broadcast etiquette, and then there's the etiquette of USA Prepares, which is what I believe to be a higher standard than broadcast etiquette. Okay? People have said to me, "You don't curse, and you don't slip." And I go, "Yeah, because I don't. So I don't have to worry about cursing because, on air, because I don't." If I hit my thumb with a hammer, it hurts just as much as anybody else. But, I can not say profanities when I hit my thumb with a hammer. It doesn't do any good to me. So I don't, because I'm a broadcaster, I kind of like the fact that I don't have to slip. And as a matter of fact, let me take it to the next step. There are some of us at USA Prepares who prefer to use aliases. And I use aliases too. But my real name is Vincent Finelli. But sometimes I use specific aliases when I'm engaged in commerce. People who don't know who I am, I would use an alias or two or three or four. And so when we get deliveries, they'll be asking for someone who does not exist at this house. But that's an alias that I use because I would prefer that shipments come here under a different name. It's not illegal. It's not immoral. It's just something that I think is good for us. And there are people who are on the air with us who use aliases. And once they tell me their alias, that's the name I call them by, even when I call them on the phone privately. And that way I don't slip. So if they want to be Joe Dokes, they're Joe Dokes from then on. Even when I introduce them to other people, they're still Joe Dokes, even though that's not their name. We'll be right back. So, Guineith, what do you have in store for us today?
Okay, now today I would like to discuss, interestingly enough, this actually goes quite well into what you were saying about etiquette, because I would like to discuss anarchy, and I would like to discuss, what would happen if we all got our heart's desires and these evil people who think that they rule us, what would happen if they all went away? Because I know I would like for them all to go away. I would like to wake up one morning and just have none of them there whatsoever. But you've got to consider, what if that really happened? What would the world be like? And so it would be, there would be a state of anarchy, but we have to understand what that really means, okay? Now, around here, there's a few different definitions for anarchy. Around here, I like to go with the Jeff Berwick definition, which is without a ruler. Okay, and that doesn't necessarily mean without rules, because the rules at some point have been mutually agreed on, by humanity. And I think personally that the rules that govern us actually come from heaven, that they are written on the heart of all of us human beings on this earth, and that if you go anywhere in the world, it really doesn't matter where you go. The codes of behavior, they vary, but they're more or less the same, if that makes any sense. If you go anywhere on this earth and start hurting people and killing people and stealing from people, you're going to be in trouble. That's just something, and if you go, it's not something that I would do, and it's not something that you would do, but some people, like, for instance, might try and take people's partners away from them. That's not something I would ever do. I think that would just be hugely wrong and immoral. And, about 99.9% of the population of the earth would agree with me. And nobody has to tell them this. Everybody just knows that that sort of behavior is wrong. And it ultimately does come down to the Ten Commandments. You don't go spray painting graffiti on temples, for instance, because that would be offending God. But you've got to think, what would it be like if these evil people, they are evil. There's no reason for them to be there as far as I'm concerned, because all they ever do is make trouble. All that they ever do is try and extort money or influence or something else out of me and make me a less free person. Okay? But what would happen if they all went away? Could you imagine that, Vincent?
Well, for what I see in the parking lots at Sam's Club and at Walmart, it would be anybody doing whatever the heck they wanted. So it's nice to have some kind of rules. It's nice for people to be polite. But I also think it'd be wonderful if we weren't picked on. But then again, you look at the highways, and if I'm in the fast lane going the speed limit, there's 100% certainty that within 60 seconds, someone will fly up on my back bumper and try to push me out of the fast lane, even though I'm going the speed limit. It's 100% certainty. So people are pushy. They want more than they should have, whether it be the speed limit, whether it be they want bigger cars, more than they need. People want more and more and more. They're greedy. And I think that if you look at the greatest generation, as Tom Brokaw called it, which would be the World War II types, like my dad and my mom, that generation, the generation that lived through the Great Depression, that lived with sacrifice, that stayed in line. And when I say stayed in line, there were ration coupons. I mean, you couldn't have all the meat you wanted. You couldn't have all the sugar or flour you wanted. You couldn't have tires unless tires were available and you had a ration coupon for them. So, but people were polite. And if you look at the bread lines, people would wear suits in the bread lines. And there was no pushing and cutting in line, and people were polite. But I don't think that's the case anymore. I think people have forgotten how to be polite. I think they've forgotten how to be courteous. I think they've forgotten how to open the door for a lady. They've forgotten how to say, no, you go first. They've forgotten how to hold the chair out for a lady, when she sits down at the table. They've forgotten that when you sit down for a meal, that you wait for everyone to be there, and then you start, rather than, if you're the first one, grab your plate and slam it down. We have forgotten how to be nice and polite.
Yeah. And it's like this. If you're sitting in a group of people, okay, and you're all having a meal together, and maybe you don't know some of the people in this group, if you sit and say, right, we're going to say the blessing on the food. We're going to thank God for this food. and we're going to ask God to bless this food, or we're going to thank God that this food is blessed to our bodies. So even for a plate of cereal, even, like oatmeal, or for a sandwich around here, even for a humble plate of soup, I say, okay, son, hurry up, sit down there, I'm going to bless the food. We don't necessarily have a table here because we're a Scottish family, and the Scottish people didn't do tables. Although I'm from a blue blood family, my husband was Scottish, and so I had to learn when I married him. And this is another thing of etiquette. When you get one culture, marry into another culture, the wife has to learn to do things in the husband's culture. That's etiquette, okay? So in my case, I was from a blue blood family. We always sat at the table, okay, and we always sat together as a family. And the Scottish people sit together as a family, but everybody sits on their seat and the bowl sits on their lap. And that's their in the traditional Scottish culture, that's their idea of table manners. Okay, but they have specific things about table manners, which are also in other cultures. Like if you pass somebody a knife, you never pass them the blade of the knife. You always pass them the handle of the knife, even if it's a bread and butter knife. The rule sticks. And sometimes, I remember teaching this to my children when they were little. I'd say, son, could you pass me that knife, please? And he would pass the knife blade first. And I would refuse to grab it and say, what's up, Mum? And I'd say, that's not how you hand somebody a knife. You hand it to them handle first and blade down. And there's a very good reason for that, Then you, as the person handing the knife, you take the risk of handing the knife to them. Okay, because you're the one holding the sharp bit. And if you have the blade down, then you're much less likely to cut someone. Who knows that rule of etiquette now? And I say this rule does not just extend to knives, it extends to axes, it extends to anything with a sharp blade.
Well, let me comment on that.
Yeah, who knows that rule of etiquette? I've never heard that anywhere else.
I do. And when I pass a knife, I would hold it by the handle and pass the handle. So I'm not touching the surface that would touch the food. When I pass a cup, I would hold the cup not by an area that your lips would touch. I would pass the cup from an area where your lips would never touch.
That's right. Yep. Well, in the Scottish culture, it's a slight variation. They do actually hand it to you, handle first, holding the blade, but you hold the upper section of the blade, the part of the blade that doesn't necessarily touch the food. Okay? Not the sharp surface of the blade. So that's just a minor cultural variation there. But like I say, the Scottish people, they were a pretty wild people, but you often find that the more wildish types of humans, they have their own rules and sets and etiquettes, and maybe they're not as pretty as what you would get in, like, say, for instance, blue blood society, but their rules are there nevertheless, and they need to be followed. And you might think, well, okay, let's go to a fairly extreme example of lawless society, okay? Let's go to a pirate ship. And do you think that they would have rules and laws and etiquette on a pirate ship, Vincent?
Yeah, I think there would be, but different.
There absolutely was.
Right, but different. Short fuses, very short fuses.
Yeah.
So if you fell out of line, you might be killed right then and there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, depending on which of the articles that you breached. And the articles varied from ship to ship. okay? But there were some that were fairly consistent across the board, and that is when you're on shore, you're on shore, but when you get notice that it's time to go on board, and this is the same in the Navy and it's the same in the military, you make sure that your rear end is on the ship. And if you don't, that's called desertion. And in the military, especially during times of war, I'm not sure about otherwise, it's the death penalty for desertion. And on a pirate ship, it was much the same.
Okay, we'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs. Guineith Isaacs is with us, and we're talking about rules, morality, and etiquette. And I've been pretty chaffed, if you will, about how we become so rude to each other, how we have not been as polite as we used to be. And our children are becoming more rude and more impolite. As a matter of fact, I was talking with Marty Barrett last night, USA Preparedness instructor. She's a biology instructor at the college level, has been for all of her life after graduating from the university. And she's mentioned this too. And she's going to be doing a broadcast with me on Friday talking about education today and how it's changed. And most of it is not for the good. Most of it's gotten worse. And I have a feeling that smartphones has caused part of this, a big part. People don't seem to plan. They don't plan the next move. Because your phone is with you rather than being connected to a landline. What that means is back in the 1960s, when my boyfriend, I guess you can still use that term, boyfriend, he was a boy and we were friends back in the 1960s. We went to school together. He would call my house and I would call his house. And never did anyone say, "Where are you? What are you doing?" That never happened. Pete would never call my house and say, "What are you doing?" He would never say, "Where are you?" It's impolite. But those are the first two questions that are asked of the person who says hello on the phone. "Hello, where are you?" I find that offensive. I find that unacceptable. And I get angry when I hear that. So now I answer the phone, Pizza Hut. Pizza Hut is a chain of pizza restaurants. And the reason I answer Pizza Hut is because when I say Pizza Hut, the person calling doesn't say, "Where are you?" Pizza Hut, "Where are you?" doesn't fit in with Pizza Hut. Okay? "What are you doing?" doesn't fit in with Pizza Hut. They actually take a step back and say, "I was calling for Vincent." "Okay, who's calling?" "Tom." "Okay, Tom. Do you have a last name?" "Yeah, Tom Bell." "Okay. May I ask what this is about?" And then that's not what they're used to. They're not used to calling someone and saying, "Hello, this is Vincent Finelli. May I speak with Tom?" And then when Tom answers the phone or is put on the phone, "Hi, this is Vincent Finelli. Do you have 30 seconds? Is this a good time or shall I call back later?" That's the way I do it. Not that I read that in Emily Post's book, which I have right next to me, but her book of etiquette, but because I think it's the right thing to do. If I'm going to invite someone to do something with me, I don't say, "What are you doing on the 23rd?" It's none of my business what they're doing on the 23rd. The way I would convey that is something like this. We have this event on the 23rd, the following people have been invited to attend, and we'd love to have you and your spouse over. Here's the date, here's the time, here's what we're going to be doing, and if it fits with your schedule, great. Can you let me know? That's how I do it. I don't say, what are you doing on the 23rd? Really, it's none of my business. And if I did, they should say, it's none of your business. But we've lost the politeness. We've lost the communication skills. We've lost our way. And I really don't like it. And when we come back, Guineith, let's talk about what you think it's going to be like when everything goes south. When the grid goes down and people can't charge their cell phones. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked, hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Guineith Isaacs is with us. And, class, we've been talking about a grid down situation for years. And what does it mean? Well, when the power grid goes down, the supply chain goes down. The trucks stop running. The computers don't talk to each other to reorder. Factories can't get the parts they need to make the final product. The sewage treatment plants stop working because they can't get the chemicals they need to keep treating the sewage. The water treatment plants stop working because they only have 14 days worth of chlorine on hand on average. The economy melts down. The government corporation starts martial law. Then you have chaos. So we're talking about supplies, shortages, economic meltdown, martial law, chaos. That's what we're looking forward to with a grid down situation. One of the things that I really want to mention when I'm on stage, when I run for the board of directors, one of the things I keep wanting to mention, but I don't, because I think I'll frighten people. In this great big room that's like 46,000 square feet, no windows. No windows. And it's in the evening. It's dark outside. And I want to say to a fictitious person, while I'm on the stage and the audience is there and the bright lights are on, and I want to say to a fictitious person, John, would you please turn off all the lights? Just for 5 minutes while I'm up here. Do you think panic would ensue by me telling a fictitious person that please turn off the lights? Not that the lights are going to go off. Not that we even know where the wall switch is. Just the fact that the lights are going to go out. Another thing I'd like to do is I'd like to say, I haven't done it yet. Another thing I'd like to do is say, imagine after this event's over and the thousands of people who are at the Cowan Civic Center in Lebanon, Missouri, imagine that the grid goes down and the traffic lights don't work. Do you think you're going to get across town without the traffic lights? With the hundreds of cars that are all going to be leaving the Cowan Civic Center about the same time? Do you think you're going to be able to get out of town? Do you think anyone's going to say, no, you go first, go ahead, it'll be all right. You're ahead of me, go ahead. Or do you think it's going to be chaos? I think it'll turn from people being semi-polite to people being angry just by the traffic lights not working. Guineith, what do you think?
I think that people don't even know how to run their own lives, and I think you're absolutely correct because, they've got no self-control. They don't even know how to run their own lives, okay, without having some sort of an externally imposed schedule. And by that I mean, what would happen if they couldn't get to work? What would happen if they got to work and they found that the building was locked up and that there was a note on the door saying that the company had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy and that there wasn't a job there anymore? What would they do? How would they make a check? Would they, I can tell you they would panic, okay, and they would be angry, and they would shout, and they would use bad language, and they would, probably hit something, probably break something. It's just because they've got no control over themselves. It's all an externally imposed schedule on them. They've got no idea of how to organise their own life and their own day. Now, you have probably some type of schedule at your place, Vincent. I have some type of schedule here, but it's not externally imposed. It's what has developed over the years organically, and it's what works, But I know that I get up at a certain hour. The dogs usually jump up on my bed and lick my face until I wake up. between about 6 and 7 a.m. in the morning, and I get up and I light the fire and I make some tea and I make some porridge, and then I make sure everybody's fed. And, and then the electricity comes on at a certain hour. And I say, right, well, one of the main things I do is write, okay? I have a computer, and once the electricity comes on, it's a laptop computer. It has a battery. The battery on the computer starts to charge. And once we've had something to eat and something to drink, then I can set about writing, which is mostly what I do, and doing card readings as well, and that it generates a bit of income for me. But that's more or less my day, is reading and writing, researching, and that sort of thing, and then at a certain hour I think, right, I've had enough of writing for the day. I'm going out to the garden. But you see, this is a schedule that I'm on, but it's not externally imposed. It's something that's internally developed, and everything around here gets done. You know what I mean? Because I'm used to running my own life. And if somebody showed up, if we went into a collapse scenario, okay, and somebody showed up at my gate thinking, or, that there's a single woman who lives there, we can go and roll her place, as the saying goes. We can go and rob this woman. Do you know something, Vincent? They will really, really quickly realize that they have picked on the wrong person. But most people, if hostile people like that came to their gate, they'd cry and they'd beg for mercy and they'd whinge and moan and complain, all that sort of thing. But not around here, it wouldn't. I would be out there defending my property. But you've got to realize that in a grid-down situation, you are going to be facing hostile people at the gate. And some of them, even before the collapse situation, some of them are going to be wearing police uniforms. They're going to be wearing their gang costume, And you have got to mentally prepare yourself beforehand that you're not going to let anybody come in and abuse your property and abuse your rights, and you are not going to allow yourself to be robbed. And I think I wrote in an email to you earlier that this is something that has been, probably restored to me over since the beginning of November, since I've been undergoing these past life experiences. There's a degree of there's something in my nature that has been reignited. Now, I am not, in this life, an outlaw, okay? I'm not a member of a cartel. I like to stay away from cartels, actually, okay? I'm not a career criminal, but I've come to an awareness that there's a particular way that criminals behave that doesn't have to do with them committing crimes, but it's how they keep themselves out of trouble. And if we can emulate that part of their behavior, we can all keep ourselves out of trouble, because it doesn't involve committing a crime, but it does involve being assertive, standing up for your rights, and not just allowing yourself to be knocked or rolled, as the saying goes. Okay? So if you let's say, for instance, you had a particular organization that lived next door to you. Let's just say they were the Hells Angels. Okay? Do you think that there would be many candidates in a collapse situation for people wanting to go and doing a home invasion of the Hells Angels headquarters? Do you think that's going to be likely, Vincent?
Well, tell us about it.
I don't think it would be. Because I think they would, if anyone tried to knock off a Hells Angels headquarters, I think they would very quickly realize that they had their hands full.
Oh, absolutely. No question in my mind.
Honest. Yeah.
Have you heard of a television series that ran for 3 years? I believe it started in 2016. I think it was 2016, 16, 17, and 18. Yes, and it's called Wanted. WANTED. These two women who were opposites, polar opposites in many respects, were being chased by a rogue cop who wanted to kill them. And it's about greed, it's about murder, it's about carjackings, it's about a rogue cop who lies to his peers, to his supervisors, and these two women are framed for crimes. And there is a hunt all across Australia looking for them. And they have to use their wits in order to just stay alive every day. It's a fascinating series. It's called Wanted, WANTED. I suggest you consider watching it, class, because this is just a microcosm of what you might experience should the grid go down. So we're talking about what life might be like in a less polite society. Let's say a grid down situation. So after the grid goes down, deaths will come in waves. I believe this. I believe that deaths will come in waves. The elderly will succumb first, followed by those who are medication dependent, those who need insulin, those who need heart medications, and they can't just quit cold turkey. They've got to wean off them. Then we'll have diseases like dysentery and typhoid. And then those who survive that will be those who, well, they don't have farming skills. So they're going to have to, they're not going to survive much longer than that without farming skills. Farming is going to be really tough if you've never done it before. You've got to have the knowledge, you have to have the seeds, you have to have the fertilizer, you've got to have the right growing conditions. You have to know what you're doing. And then those that survive will be in small towns, I believe. They will have overcome all of these really tough situations, the deprivations. They will have learned to produce food. But the scarcity will get worse because the things that they need will not be able to be replaced. They'll have what they have without the manufacturing of new tools, new seeds. You won't be able to go out and buy more seeds. You won't be able to go out and buy more fertilizer. So you're going to have to do it the old way. And most people have no idea that this is coming because everything's good. They go to work and they sit behind the keyboard and they type in other people's information. We don't make many things here in the United States anymore. China makes just about everything for the world. So most people don't know how to do things. Most people have no idea how to garden. They think food comes from the supermarket, and if that's too tough, we just go to a restaurant. When this happens, I believe that the number one barter item or currency will be cartridges. Cartridges. There are plenty of guns, but there aren't plenty of cartridges. Guineith, your thoughts?
Okay, I think that you're absolutely right. I think that many people are going to, because you see, people have been trained into a socialistic way of thinking, meaning that other people ought to provide for them. Now, in a collapse situation, that pretty quickly reverts to let's go and see somebody who has something that we want and let's go and take it. Okay? And that will work well for them until they come across somebody like you or somebody like me. And if that sort of person comes around here in a collapse-type situation, I may not have firearms, but I have archery skills, which the end effect is going to be much the same. And you've got to be aware that firearms are very, very heavily restricted in Australia. So, you know, and basically you've got to have a police officer basically look through your whole house before he will give you a firearms license. So I'm not happy for that to happen. So, but I have archery skills, and I have a knowledge of how these people operate, and so I'm not so inclined to just let myself be robbed. They, if there's a hostile gang shows up on my driveway, they better be prepared for there to be a few less members to their gang when I'm finished with them, you know. So probably under such a situation, they'd probably be better off to move on to somewhere else. And I think that they probably would. I'm talking about what would happen in a collapse situation here, okay? But you're absolutely right. People are going to lose it. They're losing it now, and they don't know what to do.
We'll be right back. We're going into a break. We'll be right back. So we're talking about pretty hard times. You know, one that'll be most unpleasant. There'll be no supermarkets, no restaurants, no delicatessen, no sub sandwiches, no hamburger joints, you know, no McDonald's, Burger King, and their clones. And you're going to be on your own. So I've been writing down in a spiral notebook, some of my thoughts about, you know, this book that I'm slowly writing about things that I think people ought to know, the way I do things. So I have a very simple recipe for you, and I'm calling this Vincent's Survival Soup. And here's what it is. The ingredients will last a long time, and you can buy them in cans right now. You go to your store and buy them. Can of 13 ounces of spinach, and 1 can of 14 ounces of whole potatoes. These are like soup can size cans. That's most of the ingredients. And quarter of a teaspoon of crushed red pepper, a can of water. Optionally, you can add in some garlic powder, or sliced fresh garlic, and 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. So what do? You rinse the spinach, put it in a pot and rinse it, because spinach in cans seems to have sand in it, and I want to get the extra salt out. So you rinse the spinach with water, you slice the potatoes into discs, and you add the potatoes, the garlic, the olive oil, and the can of water into a pot, and you heat it slowly. And you can serve it with the fresh garlic after the soup is heated to maintain the medicinal benefits of the garlic, or you can put the garlic in and heat it when you're heating the soup. I think it's a healthy meal. It's probably about $1.25 total cost. And you can buy a case of spinach and a case of potatoes. And if you want to extend the spinach, use 2 cans of potatoes instead of 1 per can of spinach. There's some health benefits to it. Spinach is good for you. Olive oil is good for you. The garlic is good for you. And the red pepper, the crushed red pepper, that's just adds to the taste. So that's something you can do very simply, and I suggest you consider doing that if you're going to eat it. Okay. If you're not going to eat it, don't do it. Your thoughts, Guineith?
I would say that that's probably a really good idea, but I would like to add something there. There are particular wild greens that you can eat, that you can research now, okay? Don't wait until a collapse situation happens until you begin to figure out what wild greens you can use instead of spinach, because there are many wild edible greens out there that if you don't have spinach, you can use them as spinach. And I'm thinking that you have to find out what they are now. You have to begin experimenting with cooking and eating them now before the collapse situation happens, because you don't want to be going out there in a collapse situation and figuring out what wild greens are edible and what will kill you. Okay? That is not a situation you want to be in. But 2 that are very common that grow almost everywhere are stinging nettles and milk thistle. Stinging nettles are actually highly nourishing. Okay, I'm talking about the tips, probably about the top 3 inches. Now, if you're going to go doing this, of course, either a pair of rubber gloves or figure out how to bear the pain when you're picking them, because they're called stinging nettles for a reason. They do sting. But the tips of them, they will still sting you, but they are soft. They are actually highly nourishing. And they, you can actually just about live off of them. And they are an excellent spinach substitute. But the thing is, like I say, you need to figure this out now, how to use these sorts of wild edible plants. What garden plants do you have growing in your garden that have an edible root? There are particular garden plants that are common garden plants that have an edible root, but there's other garden plants whose roots will kill you, and you need to figure that out now, which are which. And you can do that on the internet while you still have it, or you can go and buy a gardening book. Okay? But the time to do that is not when everything is going to pot once and for all. The time to do that sort of research is now. And if you find out that there's, for example, the canna lily, I don't know if you know what a canna lily is. It's otherwise known, in the United States, it's often known as the Indian shot flower. Okay? And it's a very, very common garden plant. And actually the whole plant is edible. But you need to work out what a canna lily is now, before things collapse, because if you can cultivate a whole garden full of canna lilies, you will never starve. You will never, ever starve. And what's more, if a marauding mob comes through, all they see is a garden full of flowers and garden plants, which is not necessarily going to be interesting for them. Now, the fact that those garden plants are actually useful, highly nourishing edibles is to your advantage. But there's, you've got to know what these things are beforehand. And there's particular other garden plants that some parts are edible and some parts will kill you. I'm thinking particularly of the rhubarb here. You can eat rhubarb stems, but rhubarb leaves are highly toxic and they will kill you. But you've got to know these things. I've known these things because my parents grew rhubarb and I grow rhubarb, and it's just sort of been handed down. There's a lot of people out there who are under the illusion that silver beet leaves are poisonous. They're not poisonous. They're perfectly edible. We eat them all the time. But it's the sort of thing you've got to gain this knowledge now. Does that make sense, Vincent?
It absolutely does. And something else that makes sense is, in class, we have had, before we were had a solar system, we'd lose power here at the farm. I'm talking years and years ago. And I'd want to call somebody. The landline would be up, but the internet would be down. So I wouldn't be able to look up their telephone number to call them. It's something as simple as that is going to happen when the grid goes down. The telephone lines will be up for a couple hours before they run out of reserve battery. But then you won't be able to call people. The cell towers will have generators. They'll be up for a couple of weeks, maybe, or a week. But then when they run out of fuel, cell service will be down. So if you don't have the ability to contact people, it's going to be really difficult. The companies that you buy things from will not be able to order replacement parts, replacement goods, replacement inventory. The trucks won't know where to go. GPS won't be working. There'll be a lot of things that just flat out won't be working.
Yeah, people don't know how to read a map anymore.
Where would you go to get a map?
GPSs.
Where would you go to get a map? Seriously. They used to have these welcome centers, and you pull into them, and you could, if you go to like Illinois or Indiana, they'd have these welcome centers, and you go and get a map for free. Well, they don't have very many maps anymore because people don't know how to read maps. And I think one of the last businesses you want to be in is a map publishing business, paper maps. So, yeah. So one of the things that you may want to. Mm-hmm.
Usually, they still have maps at the service stations. Mm-hmm. You can buy them. Usually, paper maps.
Well, they used to be free.
Of their local area and other areas.
To be able to get,
not here anymore. But you got to buy them here. But usually, you can still get paper maps here. But I think it's going to become more of a problem if this trend of GPS continues. And the other thing you've got to be aware of, the GPS is not necessarily going to be accurate because there's been earth changes happen, okay? And these earth changes, they are altering the diameter of the earth. There's been some earthquakes in the last 10 or 15 years that have actually been strong enough to shake the earth on its axis, which for a while there interfered with the GPS systems. I don't know if they've probably since recalibrated them. But you've got to be aware, if one of these megaquakes of 9 and upwards happens again, it could throw the GPS out of whack all over again. And you've got to be aware of this. You've got to be able to retain the old ways of doing things. Because if you don't, you are going to be in trouble in some way or another. And, for instance, one thing that I know how to do here, I know how to tan skins. Okay, it's something that I do from time to time. It's not necessarily the world's best leather, but it's leather nevertheless, and I could use it for things like making shoes, making belts, possibly making some type of a coat, or this sort of thing, and you think, well, why would you bother in this day and age well, actually, what if you couldn't get shoes anymore? What if you couldn't get warm garments anymore? You know? Would you know how to hunt an animal? Maybe, you know, that's a skill that might be worth knowing, whether with a firearm or whether with a bow and arrow.
Guineith Isaacs is with us. You'll find a link to find out more information about her on the website at usaprepares.com, usaprepares.com. So here's a comment I have. I was in a bookstore many years ago here in Missouri, and I was talking to the owner of the bookstore, and this woman came in. She said, well, I'd like to give you this encyclopedia. I have a whole set, and here's one box. Let me go to the car and get the other box. And
wow.
So she was just giving them to the bookstore. So the owner of the bookstore looked at me. She said, you're interested in these? And I said, yeah. She goes, they're yours. You can have them for free. I said, no, I can't do that, but I'll pay you for them. So I just peeled out $20 and said, how about that? So she was going to give me this set, and I gave her $20. She was delighted to get rid of them. The woman who brought them in couldn't wait to get rid of them because she was just going to throw them away.
Wow.
The bookstore was delighted that I was interested in them. I was delighted that it was, $20. I thought, I won the lottery. That's one thing. So now, what is the average price that, I just looked it up, that books like encyclopedia sets bring at an auction? So this woman is posting, and she says that her husband is a part-time auctioneer, and they typically bring $25 for a complete set. Here's what it says.
Wow.
My husband is a part-time auctioneer. In our area, at the most, they would bring $25. Usually they're thrown away. That's what she said about encyclopedia sets.
Criminal.
I totally agree.
Oh, my gosh.
And what a great starting point a set of encyclopedia would be in a grid-down situation, because there's so much information in such a compact space, because the Internet's not going to be there. The servers aren't going to be there.
Yep.
The employees aren't going to be there to keep the servers working. It's all going to go down. But you could have for $20, $25, sometimes free, a complete starting point. A set of encyclopedia.
That's right.
And I love them.
Well, I'll tell you what. I have a home library. I actually am sitting in my home library now, and I have a science encyclopedia. It was the type that was issued week by week by week that you used to get, and somebody gave me the whole set. It's called Understanding Science. I have books on divination. I have books on navigation. I have books on calculus. I have books on gardening. I have books on just about every topic that you could possibly imagine. I have classics of literature. I have books like David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. And I think I have a copy of Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And, you might think, well, why would you want Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky? It's simple. It teaches you about how the criminal mind operated in 18th century Russia.
Well, certainly.
And, then you might, if you know about that, then you might be able to have a bit of a heads up when you see somebody behaving in a similar way. It's a novel, okay?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I think it was actually the juvenile version. But I've got books on how to trim horses' feet. I've got a number of horse encyclopedias. I've got books about dog behavior. I've got books about all sorts of different topics, okay? But the thing is, I've collected these books over a long period of time, and when I find an interesting book about a topic that I don't necessarily know about, I pick up the book. And maybe the book will sit on my shelf for 10 years before I read it, but I eventually will read it. But just before we go, because I'm aware that this might be the end of the broadcast.
Yep, 10
seconds. If there's one skill that people out there should know, okay, you should know how to use black powder firearms. You were mentioning before about ammunition. If you're somebody out there who's into firearms, get to know how to use a black powder muzzle-loading weapon.
There you go.
And then you'll never have ammunition problems again.
Yep.
You'll be able to make your own.
Gwyneth, thank you so much for being with us.
God bless.